Hey, welcome to Unstrung Heroes. I'm your host, Sheri Menelli with Ron Menelli, and today we have our Unstrung hero, Frank Falbo. Frank is a guitar tech extraordinaire. He has done all sorts of things besides, you've made some gear. It's kind of a long resume there.
I've been making guitars since I'm a kid and playing guitar since a young age, and so I've always been around it, but a lot of it was on the builder side, product design side. I invented a pickup, the P-Rails, some people know of it, where I licensed it to Seymour Duncan, and then I went to work for Seymour Duncan for a while, was their vice president of product development, and so I designed some pickups and worked on pedals and other things like that when I was there. And then I've done other things in and out the industry, a variety of pedal projects, and again, pickups. Went to Fishman doing the Fluence pickups there. I came into the tech world and rig building and things like that a little later in the game as a result of some of the relationships that I'd forged and some of the people that I'd come in contact with and worked with over the years. I didn't come up as somebody who'd done small van tours and then got signed and went on a little tour. So then I started teching for these guys. So,
yeah. And now you're working with Steve Stevens with Billy Idol?
I am. Yeah, I'm Steve Stevens Tech, and I kind of got into that through a guy who was his tech, who would also tech for other people. I'd fill in periodically, or if they needed an extra person, I'd go and fill in. And I was a pretty easy and good candidate for something like that because I knew the whole rig. I knew kind of how everything worked and how to set up rigs and troubleshoot.
We were chatting this morning, and you were talking about how you tune things differently, but also guitar making tips, because here you're out on the road and somebody's headstock breaks.
Yeah, the fact that I am a maker, obviously makers do a lot of repairs. Not all, some makers just make one-off acoustic guitars, and if you ask them to repair a broken headstock, it's just not something they normally do. But I've also been a player and an owner, so I've had hundreds of guitars over the years with a variety of problems that I've decided to fix. You can be a tech and not really have all the extensive knowledge of how to build a guitar. It's not like you need those skills to do it, but for me, I see the instrument in its totality. So Steve obviously has excellent guitars. His guitars are all very high quality. Nags, Godin, there's a Les Paul thrown in there. It's a pretty wide variety. And so by knowing how the sausage is made, what's inside of the guitar, sometimes that lets me have maybe a little more insight on, I know why this is doing it in this climate, because it's that wood that's mated to this neck, and that's the fingerboard. I can tell this one is dry right now, so it needs this, even though this other guitar doesn't need that. And so those kinds of things are cool. But, there's some techs who can do field repair work and some who can't. For me, this was early on in me helping Steve or becoming his tech. We were somewhere where he has all the guitars in a vault, and then there's a row on top. And in the row on top, that's like a guitar boat. Somebody had put a tent over us, for weather or whatever. And then the string comes loose from the cinder block that's holding the tent. And so the tent ends up brushing against the headstock of a guitar that's on the boat. The guitar comes out of the boat, busts open the bungee cord, and then falls down and proceeds to have a headstock crack. Not terrible. We also have backups for everything, so it wasn't a big deal. In fact, that was the backup that fell. This was in the United States, and so I hit up the woodcraft store that I knew had the right kind of cyanoacrylate glue, and in a hotel room the next day or two, I had the headstock glued, repaired, evened out, buffed out with little microfibers, and that guitar was back in business. And sometimes you'll hear musicians say it after a headstock break, the guitar's better. And that was the case for this guitar, in that this backup guitar version now became the main one. Steve played them both. He goes, yeah, I like this one better. Let's use this one. But sometimes the reasoning for that is you have a weak spot in the headstock. That's what broke. When you use that very thin cyanoacrylate, very thin super glue, it actually goes in and penetrates all the wood fibers around it. It finds and wicks its way through all the fissures to anywhere, that it can go. Sometimes in guitar making, if I use it to fortify a certain area of the guitar, like a tremolo stud post hole or something, if I put a little in there to fortify it, I can actually see it in the end grain travel as much as 1 or 2 inches away. Like you see a couple of dots, that far away, because of course a tree has capillary action, right? It wants to bring moisture in, but also this glue is so thin that it just, like I said, it just soaks into everything, sort of plasticizes it. There's an Ibanez in the back there. Sometimes those guys with locking nuts on them are notorious for cracking at the headstock because there's 2 bolt holes coming right through. The truss rod's right there in the middle. There's hardly any wood, around it. And so that's another one where if you saturate that whole area, making sure you don't ruin the truss rod threads or something, you end up with a guitar that's better than when it was brand new and the wood has yet to crack, right? I'm able to do that stuff. I'm able to do all the fret things and what have you. So I think there are some techs out there who do it. Then there are some techs who say, hey, artist, this broke. We have to send it to the repair people to fix it. And both are valid. Just depends on what your person is wanting from a tech. If they just need you to keep the guitar strung and in tune and polished and worry about big repairs, we'll outsource that or farm that out. That's cool. But for me, I'm able to do all that stuff in the field. There's very little that I wouldn't be able to do out in the field. I'm not an amp maker. If it came time to open up a Friedman and replace some capacitor or something, plausible, but not really something I would do. But yeah, I've teched most of the gear, a lot of soldering and things like that.
So you said that you put things into place to keep your gear as good as it can be when you're working with somebody. Do you have like a checklist of things that you do? What would you recommend for other people that might not know as much as you do? Some good tips.
If you're a tech or if you're looking to go into that field, there is a sort of a mindset that you'll hear other techs talk about as well, whether it's an ounce of prevention or whether it's being 5 steps ahead or 10 steps ahead of something that might go wrong. We're always thinking about the contingencies. We're always saying, I'm going to have this cable here, we're going to plug this in, but I'm going to roll up a cord and stick it right there just in case I need it. It's there. I can go grab it, plug them in, get rid of the wireless, plug it straight in. So there's little things like that, like even on fly gigs when I have a wireless unit that we've rented or something, and then he's using the modeling unit, the Quad Cortex. Steve Stevens uses all tube amps, full rig with obviously your stuff. But if we have fly gigs, we'll do a little Quad Cortex. All the sounds are right in the box. So if I'm doing something like that, I'll keep the wireless by me, and I'll run a long cable over to plug into the Quad Cortex. That cable is the silent plug-ended cable where if something goes wrong with the wireless, I just pull it out and hand it to him. We've talked about this even at when I saw you guys at the NAMM show. What's some of the craziest stuff that's gone wrong? A lot of times it's chaotic when you're loading on and off. We just try to really treat everything well so that we aren't really ever in the situation where something's getting abused and abused and abused and then therefore it fails hard. You might get a little warning. If you treat everything real nice, you might start to hear there's a little crackle on that cable. And you get a little warning before it goes too far south. If everyone's just running over the cables with their giant head shell cases and things like that indiscriminately, then you're probably going to have to replace stuff more often. If you build your rig so that people can step on the cords when they're walking past, smash the 1/4-inch plugs down, then you're going to replace that stuff more often as well. This rig that we're using, Dave Friedman built it, and, everything's in a loom. I have 2-3 looms I have to traipse back and forth, but it's all well made, and so I'm able to just avoid things going wrong by keeping them functioning, by treating them well. And so the other little things that I would put out there, though, that I've seen bite some people on the road, let's say you have some pedals that are sitting on a pedal board, and they're never touched because they're in the loopers that you guys have. So the artist never has to touch the pedal. They just have their preset programs that bring the pedal in and out. Well, every once in a while, go turn it on and off. Go move the knobs a little bit and return them back to their location, because any little kinds of corrosion that set in, especially some pedals that have maybe a momentary switch that turns them on and off, you might have something where somebody steps on it, somebody kind of brushes it, and you don't realize until it's too late that, man, I got to hit this thing like 5 times before it turns on, and then even then it's tentative. So just regular maintenance like that, spraying out contact cleaner on some of your ins and outs. I would much rather do that stuff on the front end than be the deer in the headlights guy that has to run out on stage and scramble and unplug this and that, look around and try to do that stuff. In real time, I like to kind of already know what it might be. We have an in-ears rig, so in my ears I have Steve's mix. I also have my own tuner line channel going back into my ears, so as I'm hearing him. I'm also hearing myself when I plug into my tuner channel and play. I can hear that to balance tuning, sweeten the tuning, even with the band, the keyboards. I'll tune a guitar even for the key of the song that he's about to play when I hand it to him. I'll bias it a little bit for that, but the fact that we have the ears, I'm pretty in tune to what the rig is supposed to be doing, how it's supposed to sound, that I'll know instantaneously if something went south. That's about all I can say to somebody who's out there teching for themselves, right, on the road. Just be kind to your gear, because you're just begging for something to go wrong if you're really hard on it. And then backups, right? You know, you have a backup for your backup for everything when you're out there on the road. Never trust that only having one of something can do the trick. Incidentally, back to the headstock story, we were at a place where we had an opening band. I forget who it was, and probably shouldn't name them anyway. But they showed up. So this was after I had repaired the headstock on Steve's guitar, right? I have the glue. I have the stuff I need for headstock repair sitting in my workbench. Opening band shows up. They unpack, and the guy's main guitar has a broken headstock, has a headstock crack. And he's flipping out because he only has one backup, and it's terrible. You know, he basically said, I don't even have a backup. He just had some other guitar with him. I know that not everybody can afford to go around with the wide array of guitars that you have in your background or that I have in my background and take them all on tour so that they have backups for backups. That day was a kind of a slow day for us. We were set up. I had time. I was watching him struggle, and I said, let me see that. And so within, I don't know, an hour or something before they actually hit the stage, I had the headstock repaired, pretty well buffed out and smoothed out, and they were able to use it. Now, I didn't have to do that. And a note to anybody who's out there that's an opening act, don't ask the headliner's tech to fix your headstock. That's in poor taste, okay? But if they offer, if somebody offers to help, then so be it, right?
So the cyanoacrylate, like that sets that fast that you can put tension on it, like in that short of a period of time?
There are some accelerators that you can use, and there's debate on that because it can be argued that the accelerator can weaken a joint. It doesn't if the accelerator vapors are just causing the cure. If somebody was loose with it and they let the actual liquid of the accelerator into the glue joint, now you have a dilution, right, before it dries. But I use an aerosol mist. It's like another guitar tech tip. If you're trying to dry super glues, they have, like, there's a Luthier Supply, one glue boost. That one's good. It's in an aerosol. There's also one that's a nail glue dryer, like Sally's Beauty Supply has it, and it's for drying nail glue, which is also cyanoacrylate, and it's basically the same thing in an aerosol format. And so the misting that you get from the aerosol format means that really you're just getting a better curing, and you're not really getting any of the particulates into the glue itself. That's just for curing it on the surface. All that stuff that penetrated within, that has to dry on its own. But we're talking about 5-10 minutes on this stuff. So yes, you can have tension on it. Some rumors go around saying, depending on the cyanoacrylate, it might be an actual another day before it's found its final curing form. But I haven't experienced that. I actually don't have, and I've talked with a lot of like product engineers, even for Loctite stuff, to try to determine the validity of some of those urban legends or whatever. And it's not really the case. So yeah, if you're out there, super glue, cyanoacrylate is your friend. The thinnest stuff does that penetration, but it's super messy if you're not careful. So you can have it run down. I told some other tech to use it one time. I'm like, be careful. And he's like, no, I got it running down the fingerboard. Well, you have to clean it up, but I said be careful, right? Yeah, but yeah, it's the best for that. I love it. And then you can use it to tack things down here. And electronics people use it for wire tacking and stuff. I don't often use it for that, but you can, if you're on the road and you really got to make sure that little wire inside of a control cavity, uncovered braided shield, I can't touch the toggle switch when my artist jumps around like a maniac. Mm-hmm. You can use it like that, if you have to.
So how did you make the transition from product guy to tech? Was it with Steve Stevens, or did you start that earlier with other bands?
So I would fill in when guys would ask me, can you help out? Sure, I can help out. Same thing when I was at Seymour Duncan. We'd work with those guys. Billy does this because he loves doing it. And that's all that's required of us. So a lot of times we will have a show and we'll have one day off. We'll have another show and we'll have 2 days off. So it's a great place to be. And honestly, I'm married. I've been married for 27, 28 years and been together with my wife over 30, right? We have 4 kids. I'm not looking to be out on the road 10 months out of the year either. However, in tech world, a lot of times if somebody is with somebody like Billy Idol, they have to fill in. They will have to go find some other shows while Billy Idol isn't touring for a couple of months or fit stuff in between. For me, I just go back, do my Fishman R&D, make guitars, and work with whatever companies that I work with to develop new products. Some of the things I do even are sort of on an OEM basis. Not necessarily ghost building, but I might have somebody want me to help them to develop a new guitar or a new guitar line. And so then I draw all the CAD and I make the first prototype or the second, third, fourth, fifth prototype. Sometimes I make small production runs. I'm one of their makers, but the idea might be that later on they intend to get 50 to 200 to 500 of these things from a factory overseas. So I work with them in that regard. And so it's never bothered me that when Billy is on tour and when he isn't. But also since I've been together with my wife for the amount of time we have, and we have such a strong family unit and family relationship, we can survive this. So I really started touring with Idol in a post-COVID. That was when it really kicked in for me. Prior to that, it was just fill-in work here and there. So I had done a small tour with Deftones, and I did a recording session with them where I was in the studio for 3 weeks. And there's other things I've tech for, like I usually consider them kind of fun. There's like super groups like Kings of Chaos or Royal Machines, these groups where an artist will put together, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of their celebrity friends, and it may not be the same people every time, but they'll do some corporate shows. And that's when you get into some fun things, like Steve Stevens was playing with Billy Morrison, his band Royal Machines, when David Lee Roth came in and sang 3 songs. So now I'm getting to see Steve play some Van Halen songs with David Lee Roth singing, and you can make all the comments you want about the current status of Dave's singing or performance, but it was amazing to see it firsthand. You just fly to Arizona to some casino, and Warren DeMartini is on guitar and Dee Snider is singing the Rat songs. It's just a fun time, and it exposes you to a lot of different gear too. Then that's when you get, like I said, I'm sitting there with Warren DeMartini's actual Soldano that he used back in the day. There's a shortage of techs now. The landscape has changed. I think if anybody's out there considering, should I do this, it could be time to look into it, to try to make some inroads in this field. We do need good techs. I was in Seattle maybe. It's a day off. You're going to music stores, right? And I run into this guy. Turns out he's teched a little bit in the past. He's a guitar store guy. He's doing repairs at this store. Has a day job. I started talking to him, and many months or years now later, but he filled in as a bass tech for us once. He filled in as a guitar tech for Billy Morrison once or twice, and then the big enchilada, I had him fill in one day for me for Steve Stevens in the middle of a tour. I had to break away for like one day, and I remember he was a little nervous about that. I was like, don't worry, I got your back, But yeah, you meet people, and we're always looking. You're always kind of keep your antennas up.
So if you were a young kid that's like 20, 22, how would you break into it? What would you recommend that they learn or do to be able to get into the bands?
Well, so since I came into it organically, right, I don't have some magic recipe for when you're 22 years old, how you start to do it. It's just going to have to be relationships and putting yourself out there. And I'm sure it includes taking some gigs that you consider lesser than, before you get the gigs that are greater than. Really, my advice is treat people really well. Don't try to steal the person's job if you're filling in for somebody. Be honest. Be somebody that people want to hang out with. You've heard before when it comes to studio musicians that a lot of times the person that's hired to record guitar in the studio is not the person who graduated at the top of the class at Berkeley. It's the person that people want to hang out with. And the guitar will take care of itself. It'll be pretty good. But they keep hiring the same people back to the studio because of the experience that they have with them. So be easy to get along with, right? That's a big one. There are some camps where everyone is very closed off. They're very siloed, if you will. They have their own worlds. They're head down. They're just bass tech works on bass stuff, and the guitar is this and that, and they don't really cross over. You kind of have to pay attention to that when you go into a camp. My philosophy is more of a fireman. Everyone helps everybody. All for one, one for all. If I see out of the corner of my eye down 50 feet away that I don't like how that wah pedal is sitting there on the edge, something, I'll point it out. That's just kind of my vibe. I'll help anybody with whatever they need. I would say that's the majority of people in our field. It's fewer are the amount of people who are very selfish and self-motivated and just, like I said, with blinders on. I'm going to do my thing. Hey, man, can I borrow some guitar polish? I'm busy, no. If it's something that I had started doing when I was 20, maybe I'd be jaded right now, too. And I would be like, get away from me, kid. You know what I mean? I hope not. But it's plausible, right? There are people who've been doing this too long that I see out there sometimes. But usually that's not the case. It's a pretty good bunch, so I encourage people to get into it. The people are cool.
All right, so this is Steve Stevens' rig. This is the photos you sent me. You want to describe this bad boy here?
Yeah, if you look, so you have 3 units there. Now, the first thing we can do is ignore the 4th unit that's behind all those pedals. That's a neural quad cortex, and nowadays Steve does have his whole show programmed onto that. So if we do a fly date where all you can do is grab and go, he'll use the quad cortex. That particular setup there was in case it needed to be used as a backup, and we're doing that more often. I don't really have anything that goes down so far, nothing catastrophic, but if something happened now, that's the beauty of a rig like this, is that if a tube goes out in a head, you would have scrambled to put in the backup head, which we do have one of down below the 2. There's 3 heads total in the case. So you would have been scrambling to do that and or scrambling to replace the tube before the next show. Now, if something goes down, you just put in the neural quad cortex and go virtual. It's not as awesome as the real rig, but you just switch to that, and then you can worry about your problems later. I've still never needed to do that, but that's why that's out there in this particular photo. Of those 3 boards, the one that's on the right, that's its own ecosystem. That is the acoustic board and synth board. So he has a guitar synth on there that feeds, from either his Godin electric for a song like Flesh, or from the Godin nylon or the Godin steel strings, right? And on that board, you'll see 2 Fishman preamps. We're since kind of working on another board that there is a photo of in here as well off to the side, where it's a different compressor and a different preamp and a different reverb, and so now the acoustic guitar is getting a little more attention, and the synth is a new Boss synth. He had been using the Roland. It is, yeah. Okay. That's that. So we're trying out this new Boss synth. He likes the sounds in that better. But prior to that, he had liked the sounds in the GR33 better than any of the other new ones. So it wasn't until now that he feels like, this thing might sound a little better. And then he's going stereo now with his acoustic, with the stereo reverb from the RV500. There's the Grace preamp. There's an Empress compressor. There is an expression for the synth. And then you see that other little Boss box. You need that to convert the 13-pin GK pickups over to the signal that's needed for the little Boss synthesizer that's down on the left. And so right now in my shop, I'm in the middle of redesigning that board and putting everything on there. But if we go back to the other picture, that's where you'll see the main electric, at least as it exists on the floor. So the RJM switcher over here, and then you've got it's the mini gizmos, right, that are over on the pedal board. He controls all that stuff. So we don't have a duplicate pedal by me where I change a delay or do anything like that. Steve is self-sufficient. He hits all of his own buttons out there and runs all of his own expression pedals and everything out there on the stage. You can see there's 2 looms. Those go back to the heads. The heads are two Friedman heads. I believe both right now are two different versions of the Steve Stevens Friedman head. And as he develops more with Dave, they'll make a few little mods and things, and then that becomes the next version. And so I think both of his amps are one of them is, and then one is very close to what you would buy if you were buying the latest version. But you almost can call it dual mono, meaning he's running two heads. One head is all the way left, the other head is all the way right. He's not doing a blending thing or something and then going into having stereo effects. But everything on the pedal board that you see, that's pretty much all prior to the amp. So even the analog delay that you see in the center there is before the amp, before the preamp. So those delays get distorted. The repeat level has to be adjusted for that, and that's where the drives are, and the fuzz, and the boosts, and the compressor, and he's got the little robot thing, that it's like I think they call it a super ringtone or something like that, where it's stepping through all these different pitch modulations, so it's creating kind of a lasery effect, and he runs that on an expression pedal. So all of that stuff happens there. There's a Dire Wolf overdrive on it. He's got his signature drive. There's a couple of gates on that board. Those are in line with the drives, the little mini gates. Those are in line. So when your switcher brings in the overdrive pedal, it's bringing in the gate in series with it, so that he has a little bit of noise suppression in there when he's running the boost, right? When he's making things louder for solos and what have you. So it's pretty smartly done setup. And then you ratchet back over to the left where you have your switcher, and you have a lot of the ins and outs. And that line 6 unit that's off to the left, that's the stereo effects that are post, that are in the effects loop. Doesn't use much from there, but like ping pong delays, where it's a very digital sounding delay, that comes from the line 6. Some of the choruses come from there. Sometimes that invokes a noise gate as well, because now that's post preamp, so just a little bit of tweak. A lot of times that gate doesn't do that much, but if we're in a terrible environment noise wise, he will crank up the threshold, right? So he has a little bit more noise protection there. And so back by the heads, we are running a quasi-quiet stage. There's not much volume on stage. The heads are feeding load boxes. He's used a variety of load boxes. He started with the Boss Wazacraft. Then we have the 2 notes units. He's the Torpedo, the Captor X. Those are sitting in the back of his system. And he has a cabinet pack that he's made with them, where we went into Dave Grohl's studio, and they had all the mics, and they had all the stuff, and they move the mics, keep taking impulses as they move things around. And so that's awesome, because then he can have a speaker cabinet that he used for Top Gun or something you never would take on the road. But we have the profiles in the unit of that, so it's like you now can travel virtually with those cabinets. We talked about the Quad Cortex. That's one of the best units out there for what it's trying to do. It still can't take the place of the real amps for us, for Steve, right? And much of it's tactile, but a lot of it is tonal as well. And what you find is you can play a whole show on the Quad Cortex, and you go, man, that sounded great. And then the next day you hook back up with your A rig, because you meet up with the semi truck for another gig, and you're back to your own rig with the tubes, and there's just like a sigh of relief when you just play the real stuff. There's absolutely a difference to it, and I say that all because the one area where the digital technology is almost, you could argue, has bested the traditional and analog is in the IR. In other words, if you're going to fake anything out, you can fake out speaker cabs and microphones. And it's because that's all happening post-distortion. So all of your clipping, all your dynamic stuff, all your tubes, even your power tube saturation, as long as that stuff is all real, then what I get out of the phony cabinet and microphone is actually better. It's more consistent. There's no mic bleed from night to night. I don't have a microphone just a little bit off. There's no comb filtering from 2 or 3 cabinets. He used to run 3 cabs, even when he ran 2, 1 mic on each one. Each mic is picking up from the other guy. We don't have that now. And then lately he's been trying a Red 7 makes a load box and they have their variety of their Marshall-y, Celestion-y IRs, and they'll sound great as well. Because of the way that load box is made, that one has some effects loops in it. So now the delays and the choruses can actually come post power tube in the same way that they would if you put them at the board, right? After you mic'd a cabinet in the studio. So now the delays and the choruses are even cleaner, and they aren't being garbled or muddied up, by the power tube drive stage. Because again, with those load boxes, you can run those 100-watt Friedmans pretty loud and get the sound like you really wanted, the sound that would have crushed a microphone, diaphragm, and a speaker cabinet. You can get up loud, and you got the best version of the amplifier into the best version of the cabinet at any level you want, right? And the best placement of the microphones that you have in that arrangement. And that was interesting. But what we noticed when we first put that together, and I was talking to you at NAMM about it, we first ran that. Every once in a while, you'd make them switch, and you'd switch, and the line 6 would switch either a scene change or a patch or whatever. And there'd be just this noise, like this little glitchy noise, like a high-pitched chirp. And I kept trying to figure out and theorize what it could have been. I have a gigantic rack back here. I've been running, MIDI 20-something space racks since the 90s, right? Personally, myself. So I know that there's always something. Like this one new piece of gear I stuck in takes longer to switch patches than the other ones do. I have to run a 50-foot, 25-foot MIDI cable in front of it so that I can try to get some time alignment in the patch changes or something. So sometimes, it can be that, but you do the scene change so that you don't have a dropout, right? That's the whole reason. You don't want the dropout from a patch change or program change. You want it just to adjust the parameters of some things. And so we get this chirping noise, and when it was in the effects loop post power amp, it was way louder. So it was there when we went back to the old way, but it was much louder. And so then I got friends who used to work for Seymour Duncan that are over at Line 6 and Yamaha. I was able to call in some favors, and then right away an engineer finally at Line 6 goes, okay, check and see if he's got the delay time change set as authentic. And we all know that if you take a delay pedal, analog delay pedals mostly, and you change the time, you get a chipmunk noise if you go faster, and you get a Darth Vader noise if you go slower. And people have played with that throughout the years to make crazy feedback noises and things like that. And so it turns out that noise, and I had suspected this because I know how digital delays work, and I was like, it's something in, because we isolated it to when the delay times changed, right? So when he was at X number of beats per minute or whatever delay time, and then he changed it, right? It went to a different time, we would hear that noise. And you'd only hear it if you were playing through it. If you stopped the strings and you didn't have audio, you didn't hear the noise. You might have heard a little click, but something we can all live with. So that chirping noise was when there was audio going through it. And I said, this thing doesn't know what to do with what's recycling around in the delay loop, in the feedback loop. It's something being messed with there. And so then as soon as I took it from I think it was authentic to whatever else they called it, it virtually went away. Because now it was going to just dump the data in the feedback loop and start again with whatever notes that you were playing. And that turned out to be
wow. So that's okay. Yeah, because I think when we last spoke, you were still trying to figure out what it was. I think
I was.
When we were at NAMM, and yeah. Okay, well that's cool.
Yeah, and it
Glad
caused
you
us
found
to
it.
use. Yeah, we went back to doing the two notes and having stuff in the effects loop then for a while. Then went back to the Red 7, and then that worked. Steve's always messing around with stuff. He's kind of in that relentless pursuit of what the next thing is. Cool pieces of gear come out. A lot of times I'll have them sitting there, or he'll send me a picture from his house. Even like that Fender modeler. Like, is it better than the Neural? For us, no. But he had one. He was checking it out. Tried to see what it was all about.
Sounds like he's a very hands-on player. Some guys just tell their techs, just make me sound good. But from what I've heard from you and others, he's like all about getting his hands on it himself.
Well, and being such a geek that I am about all the gear, like that's my favorite. I love working with someone like him because we can nerd out about it and talk about it. And he's the one that's programming all of his stuff too. He's the one that brings his own laptop, right, and plugs in to the RJM stuff and plugs into his Line 6 and does all of his editing. So he makes all that stuff. I don't end up needing to do it. I'm watching over his shoulder, kind of making sure I know what's happening so that I know if it isn't working right. What did you just do? Mm-hmm. I changed the delay time on this. Okay. And then I know to listen, like, did it stick or is the delay time still wrong? Mm-hmm. Or I can preempt. Cool. I can be preemptive about something. I can say, hey, you got 158 on this one, and then when I go here, it's 168. Should that still be 158? It's the same song. Oh, yeah.
So, being that you're a guitar guy, I guess I should ask you, like, what's the most epic guitar that you ever personally had your hands on? Is there a famous one or something that comes to mind?
Yeah, this is also true of being in the pickups world, right? A Bonamassa or someone brings you this holy grail guitar and says, we have to replace these pickups. So I've had things like Angus Young's tech brought me Angus's number 1 and number 2 when I was at Seymour Duncan. The number 1 sounded perfect. The number 2 didn't. So if he broke a string, he gave him number 2, and Angus handed him number 2 back by the end of that song and expected to take number 1. They took the pickup from 1 and 2 and swapped them. That wasn't it. And so when now you have people that are going crazy on these theoretical tone width debates that you could put strings on a bar stool and it's going to sound the same as a Telecaster. The honest truth of that is that everything is sympathetic, right? Everything resonates and vibrates together. So everything's in a feedback loop with itself. So, of course, the wood makes a difference. You can prove it out, again, by somebody like Angus saying the pickup wasn't it. I swapped the pickups. It's not the same. But, again, he's playing at 8 jillion decibels. He's got 4x12 cabinets blasting at him. So part of that feedback loop is the sound pressure level, right? It's the SPL coming out of the cabinets, driving the instruments, driving the wood of the body to the point of feedback. And so he wants to be able to hold a note and get the right feel. And so the fix for him on that number 2 was extensive. He only wants the plastic saddles. He doesn't want metal saddles on the bridge. Well, Graphtec had just come out with Resomax, which was kind of like a hybrid. They were smashing metal particles into a plastic mold at the same time, so the saddles were a little more dense. And changing the nut and fixing the bridge studs, his bridge ground was disintegrated from sweat and rain. And so doing all this work so that the physical guitar, which they were very different from each other, so the physical guitar would behave more like the other one. And so then at the very end, we were able to make a pickup at Seymour Duncan that was, again, slightly different so that it would kind of give that second guitar that little extra delta, right? It would kind of make up some of the difference between the two. I think we even degaussed the neck pickup because the amount of magnetism that's in the neck pickup can affect how easily the string continues to vibrate, right? Stronger magnet's going to kind of put a little chokehold on the string. So silly things like that, but they all added up to make a difference. And when I heard the Tales from the Road, if Angus breaks a string now, I give him number 2. He plays number 2 till the end of the set.
Wow.
Or he plays it for a good 7 songs before he comes back to me and says, can I have number 1 back after I broke a string? So those are some of the famous ones. I went to Yngwie's house to do some R&D, got to play some of his fun stuff. And we did an R&D program with Slash, so I had spent some time with his original Derrig Les Paul, comparing that to the new Les Pauls with the different pickups in them. Most recently, I helped out a guy, Jason Sine. He was also a guitar player in 30 Knobs for a while, which is Mike Campbell's project. Some of the Tom Petty guys, and there's some crossover with those guys. And so he had a recording session that I teched for and a gig. He brings the 59 Les Paul to the gig, just brings it to the small venue gig, yeah. And so I had spent some time on his actual 59. It's a player guitar, meaning that it has new frets and it's set up to play well rather than being enshrined and behind glass. So it plays, sounds great, but confirmed all the stuff that I thought and knew of any other 59 Les Paul that I had held, which is that they are amazing. As a guitar maker, if you really set out to capture all that, you can get about 99% of the way there. So it isn't unobtainable, but it's pretty significant. After that, 59 Les Paul, the other guitars are just some silly 50s Tellys and Strats. More the real thing. This guy has it all, right? So everything he has is the real thing. And so I've spent some time with those, but you got Warren DeMartini's Soldano that he made albums on, things like that. Steve's got some pretty amazing guitars. Some are kept in his locker. We aren't taking him out on tour, but you get to spend some time with him. And the most cliche, I think, would be that 59 Les Paul. I was teching sort of out in the open on that one, There was a lot of onlookers like, that's it, that's the 59. I think he brought the 59, right? But some guy, I saw him pulling out his phone, and just right about as he's getting ready to snap the photo, I just casually tossed my shirt over the top of the guitar. And he was like, oh, come on, And so I looked at him and I took it off. But, yeah, there was some geeks at that show. I wanted to see that guitar. But, man, Steph Carpenter has some really cool, like, ESP custom shops. Just crazy stuff. When I did his, not as a tech, but as the Fishman guy, we swapped out all of his pickups for Fishmans. He had EMGs, and we swapped all those out. So those were all at my shop for a while. I've been able to come up against a lot of unique and cool instruments. And in the pickup world, it's funny because people think they know what a 59 Les Paul sounds like, right? Or a PAF pickup or a vintage Strat. They think they know what it sounds like because they've played the replicas. And then you get the real one. The most cliche one is like how a vintage 59 Les Paul doesn't sound like when Led Zeppelin was playing with humbuckers. It sounds more like a Telecaster, right? I mean, the pickups are very bright and clean. And so again, cliche, but those are the things that help when I'm designing a pickup, because now if I need to know what target I need to hit, I've been fortunate enough to be around all the cool instruments that I might be trying to emulate so that I can hit those targets.
Tell us a little more about the pickups that you've done. You said you did the P-rails for Seymour Duncan, but do you have a specific focus on the kind of stuff that you do, or were there specific projects that you really thought came out great?
Yeah, I mean, the entire Fishman Fluence project in totality is amazing. It's brand new. It's a different technology, how they make a coil, right? It's a 48-layer PCB, all with each layer having its own precision coil on it. So that coil is laid up, one row at a time, which makes it much more phase linear. It's faster. There's less comb filtering, so the sonic, like the footprint is denser. It's stuff that you wouldn't see until you zoomed in to the nano, right? Little weird phase anomalies. But the time alignment of all the audio in that pickup coil is perfect, right? So any pickup we've designed with that technology, I've been happy about. P-Rails was something I designed. I licensed it to Duncan and went to work for them around the same time to be their product development guy. So there's a lot of pickups that I worked on while I was there as well. That was in the vein of being the product guy. Some of it might have been something I invented, or it's something now we're talking about collaboration, right? You got the whole team, all the engineers, coming up with ideas and working through some things. But when it comes to the product development, there are things that I like. There's the styles of music that I like. I have a certain way of playing because I'm a musician, right? I'm a guitar player. I like developing product even when I don't like the product. Like, I really like that challenge. If someone doesn't play like me and they don't play music I like, and they say we need a pickup that sounds like this or does this, I love doing that. I love hitting that target even though it's not something that I like. So there are two schools of product development, right? One is very selfish, which says if I like it, I'm going to make it, and then we'll see who else thinks like me. We're going to see who else likes the thing that I like, because I'm going to make what I like, and then all the people who think like me are going to buy that. And the other school is I'm going to find out what somebody else needs, what they want. And those are the kinds of things that I've heard you guys talk about. If someone else needs my device to do a certain thing, I'm not going to say, well, I don't think that's how I would have made the switch if I was on stage in front of 75,000 people. You have to get out of the way. You have to say, okay, well, then tell me what you need. Why do you need it? Okay. Sometimes people tell you why they need something, and then you do have another alternative solution. You say, okay, I understand that, but if I did it this way, have you thought about this? And the person goes, no, I never thought about that. I mean, expression pedal could do both those things at the same time. You might have suggestions that alleviate the need for someone to get something that they think they need custom. But otherwise, yeah, I love it. I love doing product development. Again, even for stuff I don't like, or if I have to make a pedal that I don't like how it sounds. Love it. I love the challenge. Like, is that the sound you wanted? Yeah, okay, good.
That's awesome.
I know it's all about the process and making it happen. Yeah, totally great.
Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap this up, I've got two more questions. One is, sure, do you have a Spinal Tap moment? And then the second one is kind of almost the same, but a little different. Your Unstrung Hero moment.
On one of those supergroup gigs, I was teching for a guy, It was supposed to be Warren DeMartini on that one. He couldn't make it. Got COVID at the time. They had another guy come in, fantastic guitar player, came in, and Brent Woods, I think, and all rented Marshalls. And we went through, quite literally, I believe, 5 rented Marshalls by the time the show was over. They just kept blowing up. Yeah. And so that's me, so I'm going out there, placing one down behind the one main one. So again, doing the whole thing that you have to do to get stuff swapped out. I believe he had started with having 2 Marshalls on, right? That was his thing, was 2 heads, 2 cabs. I don't think he cared about stereo. I think he was more of a tube, amp blending guy. And I think by the end of the show, we had 1, left that was working. But that was some funny stuff. Just to watch that happen in real time. All this rental stuff was just garbage from wherever they got it. And I don't remember what town it was, but that was it. So rental gear is always a crapshoot. You never know what you're going to get. When we do fly dates now, like I said, we take that quad Cortex. I don't care if the cabinet they put behind Steve works well or not. Doesn't matter to me because I'm not using it. But if you have to use that stuff, you have to use that rental gear as a backup. Rental stuff is, nightmare. I've had some nail-biting moments. Like Steve had an acoustic preamp that he once used. It goes down before the show, right? You're like, how am I going to do this? Ultimately, you could put the acoustic guitar into a DI box and just get a signal if you had to. But that was something more like he had a tuner plugged into the back that was in the 1/4 inch, and the XLR was coming out of it. Something like an op amp blew like between those two, the DI, to where I ended up getting in the unit, figuring out if I unplugged the 1/4 inch output, the tuner output, the XLR output came back online. So we were good. And since then, we switched out for those Fishmans.
Earlier, you were telling me about pepper spray in Chile. You want to tell that story?
That was kind of crazy. We were down there, and they had an election coming up like in a day or two. And so there was a little bit of unrest outside. We always feel safe. It's Billy Idol's crew. They're not making us walk down the street by ourselves to the hotel room or anything. So we're okay. And even in the venue, we were okay. There was nothing wrong inside the venue, aside from the fact that they pepper sprayed some people outside. And so it made its way into the building. And our sound guy up front of house got it first, but we all felt it. It's a very sort of a white pepper allergy attack where you're sneezing and hurting and stuff. And Billy Idol got it, of course. So we took like a 20-minute break. The crowd was very enthusiastic. Came back, and all was good. That was an interesting moment. I think the guy, one of the crew members had shown me, he had a cell phone video of when they had used pepper spray, I think the night before. Don't quote me on this, but in the local news, they said that they didn't use pepper spray on the crowd. That was the official line, was, no, we didn't. I don't know why. I don't know. That must have meant something to somebody. My eyes would tell you different. We all knew what happened that night, but that was kind of an interesting thing. We heard them saying, oh, no, they said they didn't use pepper spray, or whatever it was, whatever their version of it is. So, yeah, that was kind of crazy.
Yeah, that qualifies.
You had one more story about the other bands that were touring with you guys, and all of their gear got stuck in Serbia, or something happened that was...
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so this was with Generation Sex. So I've done Steve Jones. We did, he's a Sex Pistols guy, and he did a thing with Billy Idol where they put Generation X members and Sex Pistols members, and they did a thing throughout Europe. So I said, okay, I'll do it. So I went over to Europe, did that. That was a great time. Yeah, we were on some festival, and it was twice we were away with Hollywood Vampires, meet up with them. Our keyboard tech was teching for their keyboard player as well. So just a couple of random meetups. It's a day or two prior. I'm walking out of my hotel room. I see my buddy. I go, hey, what's going on? I'm just walking to the local music store. Because that's what you do when you're on the road, right? Go to hit all local music stores and pawn shops, look for cool stuff. And he goes, our stuff's not going to make it. And I was like, well, I'm going to the store right now. Let's go, So it turned out that at that store, they were able to rent and buy a lot of stuff to replace. Johnny Depp didn't have anything. Joe Perry, they didn't have any of their stuff. So nothing. That's never happened to us, where literally nothing shows up. You might have one thing missing for some reason on it if it had to get shipped in, or if we do a fly date and we're carrying everything ourselves, the airline could lose a bag. And that happened on that same tour for Generation Sex with Steve Jones. I had a suitcase filled with all of our cables and a lot of my own personal stuff as well, clothing and whatnot. So I'm on the plane. I watched them loading the stuff under the plane, and I watch them drive off the golf cart thing with my bag still on it.
Oh, no.
And oh yeah, if I could have jumped through the window, I would have. I watched it go off, and sure enough, Final Destination, it's not there. Weeks and months later, British Airways, no, we don't have your bag. You have to settle out. They gave me some cash for it. But luckily, the actual pedal board, which I had put in that suitcase sometimes, was out. I pulled it out, stuck it in the overhead that day because we had to hit the ground running. You know what I mean? It was like, let's get this out so that when we leave, we just pull it and there's no risk of it going anywhere. And so I didn't lose the pedal board. We didn't lose guitars. But I lost all the interconnects, which also meant European power plugs. So we did have to scramble. When the Vampires lost all their stuff, we loaned them some stuff or helped them out to try to get through whatever little we could. But yeah, it was a festival where those guys put together an entire show where you wouldn't have known that all their gear was missing.
Wow.
They put an entire show together in a day or two with rentals and just buying stuff. Each guy had to use fewer items, right? Johnny Depp has whatever he's got. He was down to like 3 pedals and a Marshall or something. But
wow.
Yeah, so it's not that crazy stuff doesn't happen, but you try to outthink it. You try to get ahead of it.
I guess in wrapping up, is there anything that people ask you that people just want to know?
Most of the time, they want confirmation that these guys are cool. And they almost exclusively always are. At least at the level that we're at. Everyone's nice, they're kind. Steve is the nicest guy I could ask to work with. Billy Idol's the nicest, coolest guy. There's no weird drama. There's memes about it, like what people think happens backstage, and versus what's really happens backstage is just this, right? There's nothing exciting, is happening. People are waiting around for a burrito. People are sober nowadays, right? And so I think that has a lot to do with it as well. I mean, if you start reading a host of stories about somebody who's a jerk, you can believe it. But yeah, for the most part, if you're wanting to get into this field, most of the people that I've worked with have been great. Even some people who have been rumored to not. I think maybe they just meet me. They see that I have sort of a core competency level and I have an interface or an interaction with them, and they're cool to me. I have no issues. Sometimes you hear stories of techs not getting along with an artist. And you do a little digging, and we find out the tech is kind of a bipolar temper tantrum person. So it's a little from column A and a little from column B. But that's probably the most thing. Like, is he cool? Are they cool? Are they cool to work with? Are they nice? That's the one I get a lot. And you get all the gear questions, but that's I like talking about that. So I'm not burdened by someone like asking me which overdrive pedal you used on a certain song. I love that kind of talk.
Well, that's cool. Well, gosh, we should wrap this up, and thank you so much, Frank, for coming on. If Steve ever wants to come on and talk gear, since he does all his programming, we'd always welcome him as well.
I will mention that, yeah.
And any other texts that you want to send our way that you think would be fun to have on the show, send them our way. But anyway, thank you.
All gear nerds are welcome.
Yes, all gear nerds are. Ron, this is Ron's way of geeking out.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love it.
All right. Well, thank you.